Okay, today we're going to talk about books that I love that you may not have heard of. I'm trying to give you guys books that other people aren't going to talk about because I feel like I talked about Dune at one point this week. That's a book that anyone can talk about. I've talked about Lord of the Rings or Nietzsche. These are all books that you've heard of. These are all books that are you can find on the shelves. Here are some works that are more difficult to find. This is the list of books. I will hold them up here for a second. Everyone yells at me for not doing that, so I figured I might as well start doing that. The first thing we have is Tears and Laughter by Khalil Gibran. I'm sure you've heard of Khalil Gibran. If you haven't, go read The Prophet right now. Just click off this video. It's way more important than whatever I'm about to say, but Tears and Laughter is interesting because I have a collected works of Khalil Gibran. It does not have this work in it. I have this whole big book that's like 1,000 or so pages, and it does not have this work in it. And it's one of my favorite things that he's ever written. And simply put, it's a collection of poems and stories. And at the end, there's a very heart wrenching and sad story that actually turns out to be true. I'm not going to spoil it, but it has a Shakespearean-esque tragedy at the end of it. That's all I will say. But yeah, it's something that will make you laugh. It's something that will make you cry, as the name implies. And it's really about the yin yang. It's really about the push pull. It's really about the happy moments and then the bittersweet endings that Gibran is able to evoke in you. And it's very impressive when a artist or a poet can make you happy, but it's also more so impressive when they can make you cry at the same time. And that's something that Gibran does, unlike anyone else I've ever read. And Tears and Laughter is certainly a work that really did that to me, that really inspired that kind of emotion. So yeah, I don't know if you'll be able to find it. I found this at a used bookstore for like $5, and it's still one of my favorite works that I've ever read. And yeah, very short, very, very, very sweet though. Next thing we have comes from the Complete Poems of William Blake. I don't even know if you can get a copy of the book that I'm going to talk about. It's called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. You may have to get it in a collected works. Interestingly enough, people really don't know about Blake now. I've only seen one work by him ever in any bookstore, and it's quite unfortunate because I think Blake is up there among the likes of any poet. I think his influence is astounding on my own writing, and I really just read Blake and you'll understand what I'm talking about. He just puts things in a way that's almost mythic, that's almost the words aren't coming to me right now, but The Marriage of Heaven and Hell is basically about the push pull, the yin yang, the give and take of life. I talked about Heraclitus yesterday, but it's that sort of idea that you can never step in the same river twice. That it's the fact that there's good and bad that gives life meaning. Without that push and pull, there is no point to it, because if everything was good, would you enjoy your life? It sounds really, really nice if everything went your way. But if everything went your way, you would eventually be bored because there'd be no struggle. There'd be no challenge. It's our failures that make our successes mean that much more. And more or less that's what this work is about. But there's a part of it, and it's called The Proverbs of Hell. I know it sounds very heretical. And in fact, that's why Blake wrote it, because he was pointing out common hypocrisies with common doctrine and dogma and stuff like that, to try to kind of get you to a more holistic, more realistic interpretation of the Bible. Blake was somebody who didn't read anything except the Bible his entire life, and that's why all of his symbolism is biblical, simply because he was so inspired by the work. And I'm pretty sure he said himself that his poetry cannot come close to the poetry of the Bible, and that's really saying a lot. But yeah, Blake is someone that I genuinely urge you to read, and if you like poetry at all, I think you're going to love Blake. Next thing we have is Faust. I don't know how to say this guy's name. It looks like Goethe. Someone in the comments, please tell me how to say this guy's name. Whenever I talk about this book, I just say Faust. I don't talk about the guy who wrote it. But if you know anything about this book, it inspired Jung, it inspired Nietzsche, it inspired Schopenhauer, it inspired Freud as well, which is kind of hilarious because a lot of this is allegory and a lot of this is very symbolic, and Freud was a very black and white kind of person. I wouldn't expect him to enjoy poetry at all. But yeah, Faust is really the tale of a man who sold his soul, and it's kind of a myth that's been told upon generations upon generations upon generations. in some instances he is sent to hell and all this other stuff. He's eternal damnation and stuff like that. In this one, he's redeemed, but overall, it's a really, really, really good story, and it's really the fundamental basis of most of modern philosophy. I mean, it's up there among the likes of Shakespeare with its influence on German intellectuals, and for good or bad, I don't. Depending on your opinion of people like Nietzsche or Jung or Freud or anyone like that, but it's a great work, and I don't know if it's just me. I have this block in my mind where I can't remember plays that well, so I really would have to reread it to tell you about my favorite parts about it. But I did enjoy it while I was reading it, and I think it's one of those works that if you enjoy any of the names that I said, it will be very interesting to read, because it's always interesting to read what inspired my favorite authors. In fact, that's really where I get a lot of my books from. I will be reading a book and then it will mention a name, and I see that name time and time again, and it will make me go out and start reading that author. Sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. Generally, what inspires my favorite authors is also inspirational to me, and that's how I find new authors. But every once in a while, you're like, I don't see what they're saying in this, and But yeah, we're on to the last book, and this is actually my favorite book. I saved the best for last. This is actually a book that I'm going to reread fairly soon. I think after I finish Dune. There might be one more book that I told someone I was going to read, but after I finish the third Dune book, I'm going to pick this back up and read it again, and kind of give updated thoughts and see if it held up and see if it was something that is still at the top of my list as my favorite works. But this is the Book of Mere Dad. There's a few reasons why you haven't heard about this book, because I still think to this day it's the best book I ever read, but it was not originally written in English. It was not backed by a large publisher. The author was friends with Khalil Gibran, a very, very celebrated writer in his own regards, but this guy didn't have the same kind of pull. His name is not really remembered the same amount. Like, if you go on Wikipedia and look up Mikhail Naimi, all you see is about the Book of Mere Dad. You don't really see much more than that, and it's unfortunate, because I think this book rivals anything else I've ever read, and it's really a story about how we've gotten away from the real soul of things. It's basically Nietzsche's idea of God is dead, put into an allegory, put into a story. And really what the book is about is there's this guy, Mere Dad, and he basically goes to this monastery, and he goes as a poor beggar, and people are like, oh, this guy's just a servant, this guy's just this. He's getting berated, and then one day, after 7 years of silence, he begins to speak, and he begins to speak in prophetic ways and basically tear down the entire institution that was once a great place of worship, once a place that was supposed to prevent the future fall of man, and forgot all of its morality, forgot all of its purpose. And through the course of the book, he kind of turns everyone in the right direction, kind of steers everyone away from their profiteering and more greedy ways, and into a more holistic and a more enveloping and better way of worshiping, and just really he just improves everyone's lives and makes them better people. And I think it's one of the best stories I've ever read. I'm vastly oversimplifying it. You really need to read it for yourself. It's extremely deep. It has a lot of things that will really resonate with you. The thing that's always stuck with me once I read this book was, we have such a bad idea of sin. When we think of the idea of sin, we think it's a nasty thing. We think it's a bad word. We associate all of the wrong that we've ever done, and it kind of festers inside of us. And, think about the things that you've done wrong in your life. Think about how you view your mistakes. Do you view them with shame? Because if you view them with shame, then you haven't accepted them. But the moment you accept them is the moment you can forgive yourself. And when you forgive yourself, then you can move forward. But until you do that, you'll forever feel as guilt. And that guilt and shame will weigh upon you, and it will prevent you from becoming the person you will be. It will force you to make that same mistake time and time again, because you have not forgiven yourself. And it's one of the best lessons I've ever learned. And I think, yeah, it's something that lesson alone has improved my life so much. And there's just little gems like this throughout the entire work. I really urge you to pick up this book. I really urge you to pick up any of these books. Please let me know if you've read any of these, because I don't want to feel like I'm alone in reading these books that I thoroughly enjoyed. I haven't heard that many people talk about them. I think they're more obscure than most of the books I cover. So yeah, hopefully you got some fun new things to pick up at some point. But that said, I love you guys so much. If you want the real book that nobody's ever heard of, it's my book that I just wrote. It'll be the first link in the description if you're interested. If you're not, it's fine. Just keep watching the channel. I love you guys all the same. And with that said, thank you guys for all the support recently. Love you guys so much. Peace out. I'll catch you in the next one.